disallowance motion. I call the clerk.
Business of the Senate. Notice motion number 1, standing in the name of Senator Leyonhjelm, proposing the disallowance of the Customs Prohibited Imports Amendment, Shotguns and Shotgun Magazines Regulation 2016.
Senator Leyonhjelm.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I move business of the Senate notice of motion number 1, standing in my name for today. I move to disallow this regulation, which reimposes an import ban on the Adler 7-shot lever-action shotgun. I'm bound to do this to highlight the government's treachery in dealing with me and to honour my commitment to Australia's 800,000 licensed firearm owners. On the 6th of August 2015, the government banned the importation of 7-shot lever-action shotguns. I immediately voiced opposition, and on the 12th of August 2015, the government agreed in writing to sunset the import ban in exchange for my vote on another matter. The sunset was due to take effect on the 7th of August 2016. The details of the agreement are contained in an exchange of emails which are now in the public domain. I honoured my part of the agreement. I voted with the government to oppose a Labor amendment to a bill. It wasn't a matter of high principle, but I wouldn't have voted that way but for the deal. At first, the government kept its side of the bargain, making a regulation on the 4th of September 2015 that would have lifted the import ban on the 7th of August 2016. However, on the 28th of July 2016, little more than a week before the sunset was due to take effect, the government made a new regulation reimposing the import ban. That is the subject of this disallowance motion. The Minister for Justice, Mr Keenan, called me on the day he announced the reimposition of the import ban. When I pointed out that he was breaking our agreement, he told me that he had never had any intention of allowing the shotgun to be imported. In other words, the government did a deal with me in writing in order to get my vote, in full knowledge that it would never abide by it. There is a technical term for that. It's what's known as dirty dealing. In the 45th Parliament, the government will require the support of all but 2 crossbench senators to achieve a majority when opposed by Labor and the Greens. Securing that support is obviously more likely if it is honourable and negotiates in good faith. But before I go further on that, let me first consider the merits of the import ban itself. The ban applies to lever-action shotguns with magazines of more than 5 rounds. It also prohibits the importation of magazines for lever-action shotguns that hold more than 5 rounds. The most well-known brand of lever-action shotgun is the Adler, which is made in Turkey. But there are several other brands from China and Italy. Lever-action shotguns and rifles have been around for well over a century. Some say they were first sold by Winchester. Lever-action rifles from 1867 and lever-action shotguns from 1887. There's some disagreement about around the details about that, but no disagreement about their longevity. They are not new technology. In fact, they've barely changed in over a century. The benefit of a lever-action shotgun is that it does not have to be reloaded from shells in your pocket, like a single shot or a double barrel. It is reloaded by cranking the lever. For those hunting rabbits, foxes and pigs, the ability to get repeat shots away relatively easily can mean the difference between eliminating pests or watching them escape. It's nowhere near as fast as a semi-automatic and still quite a bit slower than a pump action, but it's better than fumbling around with shells in your pocket. Lever actions also have a sporting use. There's a discipline called three-gun practical, involving pistols, rifles and shotguns, which is not very practical if the shotgun can only fire 2 shots. So lever-action shotguns are used in this discipline, at least in Australia. The idea that lever-action shotguns can be fired rapidly and that this makes them dangerous is sometimes mentioned as a reason for prohibiting them. Yes, if you crank the lever fairly quickly, it's possible to fire off shots in somewhat quick succession, although not as fast as a semi-automatic or a pump action. But you can't do that and hit what you are aiming at. There is no way of cranking a lever action while maintaining a point of aim. Shotguns have substantial recoil, which makes keeping them on target difficult at the same time as firing rapidly. In other words, if you fire quickly, you'll miss. If you want to hit what you're aiming at, slow fire is best. Anyone who knows about guns knows that, and also knows full well that those who say otherwise are ignorant and foolish. It doesn't matter whether they are in law enforcement, politicians or media. Ignorance is ignorance. You can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. A desperate gun control advocate might say that a criminal may still choose a lever-action shotgun because they don't care if they fail to hit what they aim at. But lever-action shotguns have never been the firearm of choice to criminals. If you saw off the barrel, you also saw off the magazine. It becomes a single shot. Not only that, but the Adler 7-shot shotgun has a barrel length of 28 inches, hardly something that you could hide down your shorts. As I mentioned, the import ban in question covers lever-action shotguns with magazines of more than 5 rounds. It does not affect 5-shot lever-action shotguns, which can be imported and legally owned. Like other shotguns, they are in Category A, consistent with the National Firearms Agreement. The import ban also does not prevent anyone from converting a 5-shot Adler into a 7 or 8-shot, simply by fitting a longer tube magazine. There is nothing illegal about it, and plenty of people are doing it. The only restriction is that the longer magazine has to be made in Australia, because the import ban means they can't be imported. Thus, the import ban achieves nothing, and it is certainly not preventing the ownership and use of 7-shot lever-action shotguns. Not that there is anything special about the presence of 2 extra rounds in the magazine. They do not transform it from a safe firearm to a dangerous firearm. Neither a mass murderer nor a terrorist attack is more likely because of those 2 extra rounds. And being a shotgun, its range is very limited, whereas a lever-action rifle might have a danger range of 500 metres, a lever-action shotgun is not much of a threat beyond 60 or 70 metres. And it's worth remembering that the magazine capacity, the permitted magazine capacity of the lever-action rifle, as with any other rifle, is 10 rounds. And 10 rounds is also the magazine limit on pistols, many of which are semi-automatic. Of the more than 800,000 firearm owners in Australia, relatively few want to own a lever-action shotgun, and very few care whether their lever-action shotgun holds 5 rounds or 7. However, every one of them knows the implications of creeping regulation on their sport. They know if it's lever-action shotguns today, it will be something else tomorrow. The firearms section in the Attorney General's Department has had an agenda of incremental restrictions on firearms for over a decade. Semi-automatic pistols, pump-action rifles, lever-action shotguns and lever-action rifles are on the list. The 800,000 firearm owners in Australia will not take this lying down. Indeed, I am making it my business to ensure they all know what is being done to them. For the government, there are a lot of votes to be lost and not one to be gained on this issue. So this disallowance is about much more than the fact that the government has failed to stick to an agreement. It's about what's being done to sporting shooters, taking yet another slice off the salami, yet another step in the process of disarming law-abiding Australians, of preventing them from enjoying their sport, hunting and collecting activities, towards a disarmed society where only the police, military, security guards and criminals have guns. Some might see what happened to me as part of the cut and thrust of politics. I do not. There was cut and thrust in the negotiation of the agreement. The government could have chosen at any time to withdraw. Instead, they gave their word, which they have now broken. It's about trust. In the interest of all the negotiations to come, I call on government senators to support the disallowance of this regulation. And in the interests of fairness to 800,000 decent, law-abiding Australians, I call on all senators to support the disallowance.
Thank you, Senator Leyonhjelm. Senator Carr.
Madam Deputy President, and I thank the government for their indulgence in allowing the opposition to speak first on this. Going to private circumstances, I won't be able to speak on this later on. My remarks, however, I'll pass on to Senator Moore. I trust will be able to assist in that regard. Can I just indicate fundamentally the opposition rejects Senator Leyonhjelm's position on gun control. We take the view that these are issues that go beyond, as he said, matters of his concern about the way in which he's been treated by the government in negotiations on other matters. This is fundamentally an issue which we believe ought be the subject of a bipartisan approach, and that's the approach that we have taken on this question. I am particularly disturbed by Senator Leyonhjelm's statements that he has said that he was prepared to trade his vote on this matter, on a matter he said that wasn't of great principle to him, but he was prepared to trade his vote in return for government action in terms of lifting the ban on the importation of the Adler shotgun. It strikes me as extraordinary that a senator would stand in this place and quite openly announce that he was prepared to trade his vote on a matter which he said was not of principle to get the government to support him on such a controversial question. And of course he feels that this is not just about the regulations concerning the use of this particular weapon, but it was about much more substantial questions about the disarming of people in this country. And that it was a question of trust, he said to us. Now, I find this an extraordinary proposition to put in the open chamber. I've not quite heard anything like it in the many, many years I've been here now. I find it an amazing situation that this is a matter of libertarian principle from my colleague here, and that is a principle in whose pursuit the senator is prepared to trade his vote. What is even more disturbing, though, is that the government was prepared to entertain this and was prepared to accommodate Senator Leyonhjelm on these questions. Now, whether or not the government has now reneged on the deal, the fact that the proposition was actually entered into as a serious one is one that should be of great concern to this chamber, and I would suggest of great concern more broadly within our community. Now, in the aftermath of the Port Arthur shootings in 1996, there was a cross-party understanding that we should restrict the ownership of firearms in Australia. This is not America. We do, in this country, understand the importance of not privatising personal security. We take the view, I think this is widespread public support on this matter, we take the view that there ought not be a proposition that the individual is responsible for the arming themselves as a means of providing security. This is a legitimate function of the state to regulate the use of firearms, and while recognising that licensed firearm dealers by and large are very law-abiding people, the need for us to individually arm ourselves comes from a philosophy which I think is an anathema to the political culture in this country. Community protection and individual personal security, I want to emphasise, should never be a matter that requires privatised action. It should be the responsibility of the state to ensure that people are able to have that personal security. And what strikes me is that Australians have come to accept that principle. In the United States, we see a completely different attitude. And in fact, what we see is enlightened people in the United States pointing to Australia as to show what can be done by government to actually enhance opportunities for ordinary people to live safely. And we only have to look at the statistics on the number of people killed in this country with the use of firearms and compare it to the number of people killed with firearms in the United States. 10 times is more likely to be the case that a person will be killed in the United States than they are in Australia. And what's the fundamental difference? The fundamental difference is one of philosophy that the public accepts is necessary for the state to regulate the use of firearms. This is one measure that John Howard got right. And this is a measure that ought to be supported by this Parliament. It's a measure I trust the Parliament this evening follows through and rejects this particular measure that the Senator Leyonhjelm is proposing in terms of the disallowance. I understand there's only a moment to go, but I'll leave that at that point. Thank you very much.
Senator Burston.
Thank you, Madam President, Deputy President. I rise to speak in support of the motion moved by Senator Leyonhjelm in relation to the Adler shotgun. When people complain about politicians who are more concerned with appearance than reality, who are disconnected from normal people, and who are more interested in scoring points than fixing problems, you would struggle to find a better example than the way this debate has been handled and the lies and misrepresentations that have been spread about. The weapon itself at the heart of this debate should be entirely uncontroversial. If any firearm has a legitimate purpose, this one does. Aside from the entirely safety and responsible practice of recreational target shooting, many farmers rely on firearms to deal with pests and feral animals that endanger both stock and the natural environment. Shotguns are in many cases the best weapon for dealing with these predators. Against a moving target at close range, they are far superior to rifles and handguns. There is a legitimate need for shotguns in rural Australia if we are to protect both our farmers' livelihoods and our natural wildlife. There is also a legitimate purpose for medium capacity shotguns. It is common for some feral animals, pigs in particular, to move in and about medium-sized groups. In medium-sized groups. It is not at all uncommon to see a group of 5 or 6 feral pigs running around together. If you have a shotgun that holds just 2 shells, the most you can hope for is to get 2 of those pigs. And a pig that gets away is a pig that will likely inflict some very painful, very gruesome deaths on other animals. So let's have a no silly talk about animal cruelty here. The cruelest thing we can do is to let these vicious predators roam unchecked. If there is a legitimate reason for this gun to be sold in Australia, legitimate reason for this gun to be sold in Australia, not everyone will be in a situation where this gun is necessary or useful for them, but some will be, and they should have the right to access it. On the other hand, there is a compelling reason to block it. Or is there a compelling reason to block it? Could allowing this gun lead to massacres such as the tragic event at Port Arthur? Could it be used by underworld figures as part of their criminal activity? The simple answer to that, of course, is no. Long arms such as rifles and shotguns are tremendously impractical for committing crimes. Looking at FBI statistics from the United States on gun violence, and I think we'd all agree that the US has a much bigger sample size in this regard than we do, there are 12,000 murders in 2014, the last year we have data for. Of all those murders, 262 were committed by shotgun. That's about 2%. More people were killed with blunt objects. By comparison, there were 1,500 murders with knives in that time, about 6 times as many. And surely no one is silly enough to suggest we should ban kitchen knives. The simple fact of the matter is that long arms are very unsuitable weapons for criminal activity. They are big, cumbersome and difficult to conceal. But even these statistics
Senator Burston, please resume your seat. You'll be in continuation. The sitting of the Senate is suspended until 7:30.